We are here in Homer, Illinois at the Homer Fire Protection District. I'm here with Mike Dilley, who's going to take some time to talk a little bit about holiday fire safety. Mike, thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Great to
Glad
see you.
To be here.
We appreciate it. I know you've got a busy schedule, so but we're talking about some important stuff today because there's some things that folks might not be thinking about that could be the difference between a great holiday and a very terrible holiday.
Absolutely. So we like to identify some of what we call ignition sources, which are things that can cause fires, particularly around the holiday season. And some of the things I brought here that we can talk about, of course, are candles. Candles are one of the biggest problems with ignition sources in that candles have an open flame. And we've had pets that knock them over. Drapery can get into it. If you leave it unattended, it can burn down and start a fire. So we've had, and I also investigate fires. So we look for the ignition source of why the fire originated, and we come back sometimes as candles.
So as a fire investigator, you've probably seen just about everything.
I have.
Do you see an uptick during the holidays of accidents?
Yes. There's a lot more ignition sources that are out there. For instance, let's take these extension cords. Extension cords are meant for temporary use, not to be used day in and day out. This is a very lightweight, probably what we would call 18 gauge.
I've got 10 of those around my house.
They fail.
Okay.
Not only do they fail, but also people will put them underneath the furniture, underneath the rugs. If you put them underneath the rug, it can't dissipate the heat, so it can overheat and cause a fire. If you put it underneath a piece of furniture, it can get damaged and can actually fail and cause a fire. So
now, is the level of heat that those are putting out, is that impacted by how much is plugged into it?
Yes, absolutely. It's just like water through a pipe. Resistance, the more the resistance, the more heat it generates.
So the more, so say I'm plugging in my Christmas tree with 25 strands of lights. I've got some fun decorations that I've plugged in, plus the TV and my computer.
Yeah.
And I've plugged one of these into, you know, this holds 3, but you know, I get creative. Sometimes I'll find, you know, the additional thing that I can plug into this to make it more. That's probably not the best idea,
it's not.
Right?
You're overloading that. It's not meant for that.
And that can actually start a house fire.
It can. It can, because of the heat that's generated or a failure of that for, like I said, either mechanical or some other reason.
So what do you guys recommend then? Because we do have a lot of things to plug in during the holidays.
Well, if possible, I recommend you plug it directly into the receptacle.
Okay, on the wall.
Yes.
Now fires, when they get going, my understanding is they start moving pretty quick, right?
They move very quick. In fact, when a fire develops, it creates heat in terms of smoke in a building. If this room was on fire, we would be packing smoke at the top of this building, if you will, and then it radiates back down into everything in the room and creates what's called flashover.
If there is a fire, if somebody finds themselves in that situation, I know having a good plan is always important, but what would you recommend that people do if they see a fire has started or begun to start? Should they start to try and put it out first? What is the first thing that you should do?
That lot depends on your confidence level. We tell people, if you have a fire extinguisher and you have confidence that you can get it out and it's a small fire, attempt it once. Otherwise, get out of the house, call 911 and don't try. Some people said, I don't want to deal with it. And we're okay with that. Don't do it. Get out and call 911.
Safety is always priority.
Safety is number one.
Yeah.
And alerting. And while we're on alerting, this is something I want to talk about, is a working smoke detector. These things cost about $12. Some of them a little more expensive, but by and large, that's the average price. And I will make a statement here. In all my years in doing fire and doing investigations, I have never been to a fatal fire when there wasn't a working smoke detector. Now, I'm not saying that ever happens, but in my career, I've never seen it happen.
In your experience, fatalities have only happened when there was not a working smoke detector. So this is actually a true lifesaver because it alerts you when it's early enough to respond and get out of the way of danger.
Absolutely. And early enough, because when you have a fire that has developed to the flashover stage, you're probably only looking at 2 to 5 minutes in that amount of time before that starts.
That's not a lot of time.
It's not a lot of time.
Especially, I've got kids.
Yes.
So if I've got 2 to 5 minutes,
yes,
I really need to think about getting my kids out of the house, getting my pets out of the house, getting myself out of the house as fast as possible.
Absolutely. So with a working smoke detector, you're getting an early warning. It's going off at early smoke warning. So that gives you a few minutes to notify or get your family out. And then you should always have a meeting place where everybody knows before the fire where it's going to be. That way you don't have to go back in and look for anybody. You know everybody's out of the house. And so we recommend a good meeting place after you're there. And then call 911 from outside the house, not from inside the house.
All right, Mike, this is incredible, but it seems to me also that one of the major points of danger when it comes to fire safety is the kitchen.
Yes.
Why don't we go take a look at the fire station's kitchen and talk a little bit about kitchen safety?
Absolutely.